Unicode is a consortium of firms that have stakes in the technology industry. There are various tiers of membership, but the top rank is reserved for those major firms with a keen interest in controlling emoji content. Facebook, Google, and the Sultanate of Oman's Religious Affairs Division. This last firm caught my eye. Why would the Sultanate of Oman care about emojis? What is the author trying to tell us here? Is it possible that what King Solomon traded to the Queen of Sheba for 666 talents of gold were a full set of original demonic seals? Let's fast forward to the 20th century. An American archaeologist in his late 20s named Wendell Phillips began an expedition in 1955 to unearth the holdings of the Queen of Sheba. These included diverse archaeological sites in Yemen and, you may have guessed this one already, Oman. The local superstitious tribesmen tried to expel the intruder, eventually going so far as to raid his camp and abduct hostages. But something eventually caused them to reverse course on him. Ultimately, Phillips became the second Westerner ever to become a tribal sheik. Could it be that Phillips uncovered the original seals given to the Queen of Sheba? This would certainly explain what followed after. Just as we have no clear record in our sources of what Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba, so we do not know what Phillips gave to the Sultan of Oman, but we do know how Phillips was compensated. According to his New York Times obituary, soon after Philip's unearthing of the Queen of Sheba's palace, he was granted enormous concessions by the Omani government, enough to make him the world's largest individual holder of oil concessions at the time. So, what does all of this have to do with emojis? Consider this. Unicode 8 was released the same year the Omani government joined the Unicode Consortium. It is this version known as the Occult Edition of Unicode, and in which the zodiacal signs were implemented. Moreover, in Unicode 8, there are 72 face core emojis. 72. The same number as the number of demonic powers in the Ars Goetia. One side note here, the actual version of the emojis published by the Unicode is this sigillistic black and white version, which is much closer to the original seals than the cartoonized, fully rendered versions available on devices.
His work serves as a reminder of the power of innovation and the importance of pursuing ideas that challenge the status quo, even in the face of formidable obstacles. Number 6. The Orgone Generator. The Orgone Generator, a device developed by the Austrian psychoanalyst Wilhelm Reich, stands as one of the most intriguing and controversial inventions in the field of alternative medicine. Wilhelm Reich, initially part of Sigmund Freud's circle, diverged from traditional psychoanalytic doctrines, delving into areas that combined both psychological and physical aspects of human health. In the 1930s, he began to develop the theory of orgone energy, which he described as a form of energy that permeated all living things and the atmosphere. Reich believed that orgone was the substrate of all life, a blue glowing life force that could be visually observed and measured in his experiments. Reich's orgone generator, also known as an orgone accumulator, was a device he claimed could collect and store orgone energy from the environment. The most common form of this device was a box-like structure, large enough to sit in, made of alternating layers of organic and inorganic materials. The organic layers were meant to absorb the orgone energy, and the metallic ones to reflect it, creating a concentration of energy inside the box. Reich's claims about the orgone generator were broad and ambitious. He proposed that this concentrated orgone energy could be used for a variety of purposes, from improving mental and physical health to even combating diseases like cancer. Reich conducted several experiments and trials, claiming significant results in the treatment of various ailments and conditions using orgone energy. All patients who used the orgone generator stated that Reich's claims are truth. In fact, there were many that were cured by his device. The orgone generator and the concept of orgone energy quickly attracted controversy. The scientific community largely dismissed Reich's theories, criticizing the lack of empirical evidence and the seemingly mystical nature of the orgone.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually just gonna say, like, for sure, kind of that's sort of like a part one, but to connect to that, and people can go to my website. I always embed your stuff as well. So if you go to theorgonedonor.com, you'll find it there. For some reason, they can't find on YouTube or all the other platforms. But as far as what it is we're talking about, so what we're talking about is the idea that this was centered around, when you hear the name Wilhelm Reich, that's because he's considered the father of orgonomy. He, back in like the 40s and 50s, basically testing biological creature or biological beings to basically measure a like a bioelectrical force that was being attracted to or repelled by people or by living things. And this energy that, he coined, that it moves through the atmosphere, and all of it lined up with what other cultures call the chi, the prana. I think in physics, they're a lot more comfortable now using scalar, although scalar, I think that's a whole other can of worms, being unfair, because you can use scalar technology for good and bad. And I wouldn't call orgone energy bad. It's the life force. It's whatever is the anti to that is something different that's not orgone. So I'd say the same with scalar. Anyway, but the life energy, basically there are things around this realm in which we live that are exerting energy signatures that are either coherent with life or they are not. And that's why I mentioned in this realm, it's like everything is either pro-life or anti-life. And I mean that to the fullest extent. You either are and really just like the absolute truth, everything with the truth, because everything falls in line when everything is the absolute truth. It just naturally happens the way creation had, set it up to be. And so these things that exist to create, negative energy, incoherent energy, anti-life energy, there are ways to heal from those. There are ways to treat those energy fields or those devices. In this case, when I say towers, I mean cell towers. Those are one example of basically a death device, or I call them death towers, because of the energy fields that they create that are tapping into the ether, and they're doing something to manipulate this realm and its life force that passes through everything. And so, what it does is it just chain reactions and throws everything off, not just the weather. It doesn't just help with geoengineering. It's like they're literally terraforming the planet. They're changing the natural realm and overshadowing it with this fake thing. And then of course the problem is you have to fake. If you fake this over here, you got to fake this and fake that, which is what we see them trying to do. And then it all starts to kind of fall apart, because it's why you don't lie. Once you lie, you have to remember the lie, and then you can't connect, just tell the truth. Well, life would be truth. And so you can use these tools that we're talking about, what we call orgonite. And there's all this information as far as like the logistics of where it came from, how it came to be, what it's made out of, all of that. This can be found on my website. It's very compartmentalized so that it's fairly easy to find. And we talked about it in that last episode too. But these devices will tap into those energy fields. They are a method or a mechanism, kind of like the biogeometry devices that are, we all have energy structures. Everything is just talking and reacting, acting and reacting to everything else in existence all the time. Well, so what's coherent with what? And so something's trying to basically throw that off, and we're doing something to throw it on, basically put it back together. And so these devices like earth pipes, one of the things I sent for the Music and Sky is they're a device that gets buried in the ground. It's a metal pipe filled with what we call the orgonite. And there's an array of crystals inside and a matrix. I have a very specific recipe I use. I teach on my website. I've got tutorials, instructions, ingredients, and enough frequently asked questions to like keep you entertained for years. But the earth pipe is buried in the ground completely under the surface of the earth, and it will tap into those energy fields like what the cell towers are tapped into with all their network, their cables, the water sources that they put them on. And one of the things I've done over the last year I mean, I did an entire project called Earth Pipes Across Arizona. I wanted to have like a little shtick. And that is essentially what the name implies. I have put earth pipes all over the state of Arizona, but in a manner that has strategy to it. And so, like, when you're learning about all these different topics, I mean, anyone who could have a heyday listening to your podcast forever, all your guests, everyone contributes something. You learn this perspective, you learn this about water, you learn this about the ether, you learn this about geoengineering. And it's like, you put all that together. I put that together as best I can, this puzzle, and find that, like, we can use these tools to tap into the energy grid that is essentially restoring the natural order on a frequency base of this realm. And
Well, I think when I say easy, I mean relatively easy.
Yeah, San Diego was nice.
Right, but for example, gifting in the countryside is easy because you're just tossing out of the car, and it's not like you have to stop and back up and navigate through a maze of people and annoying things. It's just it's a whole different thing.
Well, let me add though that one of the easy places that you're referring to was the Central Valley, and that was when we got followed really close by a craft of mysterious origins. So even the easy places can hold great obstacles and unique situations.
Great challenges.
Exactly. But we want to thank a lot of effort to do these trips. So we want to thank everyone who helped us, because otherwise Silicon Valley would still be filled with the amount of evil it had when we got there. It still has a lot of evil people and evil industries there. But at least we put a big dent in the DOR problem. Yeah,
hopefully less now that that's been taken care of. But we did notice significant, not so much visible DOR, but just we'll get
into it. There's a whole human element to it there too, and a parasitic element as well, non-human, being that it is the Silicon Valley, the home of the tech industry.
That's right.
Entering the lair of evil.
Very high
Babylon.
DOR and EMF environment, and dealing with the people, it gets worse and worse and worse.
Every time.
Yeah, so this time, of course, was no exception, but we figure we're going to this venue. Maybe there'll be some intelligent individuals there.
We were searching for intelligent life on Earth.
Yes, and a fruitless search, I might say. It was pretty crazy. Like you said, he just did a brilliant performance.
He always does.
He always does, but
it's very life-affirming music. It's high OR music. This is the music that gets your energy level up. It makes you calm and gives you energy, like orgone energy.
But the people attending the show, and of course this has nothing to do with Steve or his work, but the people attending the show were just unbearable to be around, and just in so many different ways.
I was actually surprised by that, because his music is so life-affirming. It's so calming for the mind. It's so meditative. I was actually surprised, because in Santa Fe, I guess Santa Fe people are a little different than LA people. I don't know. Maybe the city attracts a more calm group of people, a more spiritual group of people. But in Santa Fe, it was such a perfect experience. The audience was so respectful, and everybody sat down. It was a small venue. But in LA, nobody could sit still. They had no concentration. People were talking over him. You can't really talk over this music. This is music to just zone out on, and it was just, everybody was on a smartphone. I mean, they couldn't put them down. Everybody around me was constantly picking up their phone. So there was all the annoying lights of the phones and the headache inducing energy, which we alleviated a little bit by bringing a lot of tower busters. Like, we had a couple in our pockets, and we were wearing our pendants, and so we did what we could, but you can only take so much. So there was a huge bucket of them in the car outside of the venue, so I hope that helped. As far as it goes, some people's cell phones hurt my head more than others, and I've learned that it's the DOR of the individual feeding off of it's a feedback loop. So,
But this was not just people taking phones out to take pictures of him on stage. There was that too, but we're talking
just
about
texting,
people.
random chit chat.
Exactly.
I mean, it was ridiculous.
And there's no place for that in a concert.
Actually, I was just thinking how amazing the energy would have been in there if everyone's phone was off. It would have been a completely different environment. But it was very, let me say, it was very LA. I mean, most people in LA are not from LA. People who are from LA are a whole different breed. And I really love LA people. Most people in LA that give it its bad reputation are just people who move there because they want to party. So that's the atmosphere, and you get a lot of people who are just out for a good time, cannot focus on something as meditative and intellectual as Steve Roach's music. So it was just difficult being around all the distracted hipsters.
Yes, and the thing I want to point out here is that if you're just walking around in LA at any given time, the DOR addiction is kind of diffused because there's just so many people, and of course they're all DOR addicts, but it's you don't notice it as much as when you're in an enclosed space like this, and there's something that people have to respect and be silent for, relatively silent for. It's you can start to see the people they kind of squirm in their seats.
They're
it's
addicts.
It's like a nicotine addict,
Or
who,
even worse, I mean, they're like junkies.
it's like
It's
someone.
like their skin is crawling.
It's like someone who's gone a while without a fix, and you can start to see the visual signs of, I really need it bad, like that kind of thing.
Well, Gabe, you had an interesting theory on how the OR energy of the music was affecting the DOR addicts on their cell phones.
Well, that theory is based primarily on the fact that Wilhelm Reich, when he was doing his desert experiments in the 1950s, he would use small amounts of nuclear radiation, isolated nuclear radiation, to agitate and excite the orgone energy of the Cloudbuster, his device that he was using to end drought and regrow plant life and bring rain into the Arizona desert. And based upon that reaction, I just kind of had a brainstorm randomly, and I just thought, well, maybe being around this type of music, and it is absolutely divine music. It is totally channeled from the ethers, and maybe being around that does something to the DOR itself, and therefore to the addicts that are used to just bringing the influx of DOR into their own bodies and minds.
Well, it totally makes sense because we've noticed like the parasitic neighbors will move away. We were making a lot of orgonite, and we had these terrible parasitic neighbors, and they moved just months after we started making orgonite. And for people who aren't as infected, it just changes things. Like I know somebody who we gave a big pyramid to who had two neighbors that were fighting, and they stopped fighting because they had a pyramid outside by their apartment. So, it can have different effects on different people depending on the level of DOR addiction. Most people are DOR addicts. I'm sorry to say it because that includes everybody. And I mean, that includes me and you. I had to overcome my addiction to DOR. I didn't even know I was a DOR addict. I didn't enjoy it like most people do, but I was exposed to it all the time, and I had to energetically detox. And we did this years ago. I mean, we took the Wi-Fi out of our house 5 years ago. We've been on this for a while now.
So anyway, it's just a theory. We're just learning things as we do this work with orgone energy. Nothing is proven. Nothing, I don't even think, can be proven. There is only evidence. So just food for thought, I suppose.